On February 23rd, 1685, in the little town of Halle, Germany, a son, George Friedrich Händel, was born to a wealthy and elderly barber surgeon and his wife. The father wanted his son to grow up to be a lawyer and have wealth and social position. At a very young age, little George loved to hear the choirs that sang in the streets in front of the townspeople's homes. The Händel family attended church regularly. Neither the parents nor George's Aunt Anna, who cared for him, realized how the notes coming from the church organ fascinated the little boy. When he was 7 years old, George attended school. The principal of the school is known to have loved music, so perhaps young George received some musical instruction from him. At least George was encouraged to develop his great interest in music. It has been said that one night a small keyboard instrument called a clavichord was smuggled into the attic by George's Aunt Anna and some of her friends. At every opportunity, young George would practice playing the clavichord. No one knows whether this particular story is true, but it is known that the boy did learn to play a keyboard instrument while very young. When George was about 8 years old, he accompanied his father on a trip to the castle of a duke in a nearby town. Dr. Händel was the regular surgeon at the duke's court. At the duke's castle, George somehow had an opportunity to play the chapel organ. When the duke heard the beautiful music, he ordered Dr. Händel to give the talented boy musical training. Dr. Händel was furious, but he dared not disobey this royal command. Back home, George began his musical studies with a Halle church organist who was an outstanding musician and composer. In 3 years' time, George had learned to play such instruments as the harpsichord, organ, oboe, and violin. In Berlin, at the age of 11, George performed at the court of the Elector of Brandenburg. The Elector and his wife were so impressed with the talented boy that they wrote to Dr. Händel telling him that they would take George into their service and send him to Italy for further musical training. When Dr. Händel received the letter, he was a sick old man. He absolutely refused to let his son become a musician. He ordered the boy to come home at once. Shortly after George returned, Dr. Händel died. Back home in Halle, young Händel became well known to the townspeople because of his musical ability, and his fame attracted the attention of noted musical visitors. At 17, Händel became a student at Halle University. He decided that music would be his life's work. The same year, he secured an appointment as organist of a large church in Halle. The organ was a fine instrument, and part of Händel's responsibility was to keep it in perfect working order. He also had to compose special music for church services. Soon after his 18th birthday, Händel, not satisfied to be an organist for the rest of his life, said goodbye to his family and set out for the city of Hamburg, a city noted for its great musical activity. There he hoped to make a name for himself in music. At one of the churches in Hamburg, Händel met a young organist and singer, John Matheson. They took turns playing the organ, all the while talking, laughing, and getting acquainted. This meeting was the beginning of a close friendship between the two men. To earn a living, Händel found a job as a violinist at the opera house. Here he had the opportunity to learn much about opera. Gradually, he was becoming known as a brilliant harpsichord player, an outstanding organist of his time, and a fine violinist. He spent his spare time composing, but few of these early compositions have survived. Händel's friend, John Matheson, had the leading singing role in an opera being performed. Händel was playing the harpsichord and conducting the orchestra. As soon as Matheson finished his singing, he would dash from the stage and take Händel's place at the harpsichord. Matheson wanted all the musical honors for himself as well as the singing honors. One night, Händel refused to leave the harpsichord, and they had a violent quarrel. Their argument continued outside in the marketplace where they began a duel. Luckily for Händel, Matheson's sword hit a hard button on Händel's coat and splintered in his hand. The duel quickly ended, and in a short time, the two became friends again. Händel was only 19 years old when he conducted the orchestra in the performance of his first opera, Almira. The audience enthusiastically applauded the freshness and beauty of Händel's music. Almira was the first of more than 40 operas that Händel composed. A few months later, Händel traveled to Italy, and wherever he went, in Florence, Rome, Venice, or Naples, he was welcome and entertained by the nobility. He spent 3 years in Italy and became known as an excellent composer and musician. They called him the Saxon because he came from Saxony in Germany. A story is told that Händel, playing the harpsichord at a masked ball, was heard by Alessandro Scarlatti and his son, both famous harpsichordists and composers. Even though Händel was disguised, the son exclaimed to his father, "That is either the celebrated Saxon or Satan." At a theater in Venice, Händel's new opera called Agrippina was being performed. Night after night, carriages arrived bringing enthusiastic Venetians to see and hear this opera, which made Händel famous throughout Europe. Händel became organist and choir director for the Elector of Hanover in Germany. Within a short while, Händel was granted a leave of absence to visit England. People in England welcomed Händel and praised his music highly. He played many concerts and composed a successful opera while there. At the end of a year, Händel had to return to his job in Hanover. But he had grown fond of England and resolved to return someday. Back in Hanover, Händel composed a great deal of chamber music to be played by the musicians at the German court. Chamber music is usually performed by 3, 4, or 5 musicians for a small gathering of people. But chamber music did not interest him as much as opera. He felt he must return to England, where opera was flourishing. The people of England welcomed Händel's return. Day by day, his fame and fortune increased. He had such a wonderful time there that he stayed long after the time he should have returned to his position at Hanover. About this time, the Elector of Hanover, Händel's former employer, was crowned King of England. The Queen of England had died, leaving no children to succeed her to the throne. Although the Elector was only a distant relative of the Queen, he was next in line for the throne. When the new king learned of Händel's fame as a great musician in England, he commissioned the 32-year-old composer to write special music for a forthcoming celebration. The celebration was a river party in which there was a procession of barges carrying royalty and noblemen. The king's barge was first in the procession, followed by the musician's barge playing the music Händel had written for the occasion. The king was so pleased with the music that he had it played several times. We know that music now as the water music. Having been appointed court composer to the king, Händel composed the music for a great many minuets for royal parties. A minuet is a slow, graceful dance that was popular in those days. During the next several years, Händel spent much of his time traveling. He continued to compose music of all kinds. One of his most famous melodies is the Largo from the opera Circes. The work for which Händel is best known is the famous oratorio, The Messiah. An oratorio is a musical work telling a religious story and is sung by a chorus and soloists. The Messiah tells the story of the life of Christ. The king and his royal party attended the first performance of The Messiah when it was performed in London. Händel conducted the orchestra. When the king heard the magnificent strains of the Hallelujah chorus, he was so impressed that he stood up. It is now traditional that whenever the Hallelujah chorus is sung, the audience stands. At one time, the English people were preparing a special scaffold for a fireworks display to celebrate the end of a war. As part of this celebration, there was to be a concert for which Händel, now 65 years old, was to compose the music. Händel's orchestra played as scheduled, even though the celebration didn't work out as planned. All the framework for the fireworks burst into flames. Since that time, Händel's music for this event has been known as the Royal Fireworks Music. Händel continued to compose and play the organ until he was an old man. There are 136 volumes of his works in existence today. The music he wrote was grand but simple. George Friedrich Händel was one of the greatest composers of all times.
Frédéric François Chopin. Frédéric Chopin gave us some of the finest and most original piano compositions ever written. His new ideas, full of imagination and feeling, brought about an increased appreciation for piano music on the part of both the musician and the musical public. The Chopin family home was part of a large estate in Poland. Chopin's father was a tutor for the children of the count who owned the estate. It was in this house, surrounded by snow-covered fields, that Frédéric was born in the late winter of 1810. Legend says that musicians from a neighboring village played under the windows that night in spite of the snow. While the story may not be true, popular music was to play an important part in Frédéric's life. More than once, he was to use its melodies as a source for his brilliant compositions. Frédéric was christened at the village church when he was only about 2 months old. A few months later, the Chopin family moved to the city of Warsaw, Poland. Frédéric's father, who had been born in France, had accepted a job teaching French in Warsaw. Even as a small child, Frédéric loved music so much that he used to crawl under the piano and sit there by the hour, listening to his mother play. One night, 4-year-old Frédéric was found sitting at the piano trying to play it himself. Soon his mother began giving him piano lessons. He made such rapid progress that by the time he was 6, his family decided that he should have a trained music teacher. Frédéric's teacher, Adalbert Zane, was one of the best musicians in Warsaw. He spent long hours teaching the boy to play the piano. Frédéric was always grateful to him. Through Zane, he grew to know and love the music of Haydn, Mozart, and Bach. When he was only 8 years old, Frédéric gave his first public concert. He amazed everyone by his musical ability. Frédéric was invited many times to play the piano in the palace of the Tsar's brother, Grand Duke Constantine, who greatly admired the boy's talent. Throughout his childhood, Frédéric played in most of the great palaces of Warsaw. By the time he was 10, Frédéric had already composed several fine musical pieces. While Frédéric improvised at the piano, Zwingli wrote down the music for him. The Polonaise in G minor, which was composed when Frédéric was only 7, was reviewed by the Warsaw newspaper as the work of a real musical genius. Frédéric was a good student at school. He did not especially enjoy mathematics or science, but won prizes in history and literature. During summer vacations away from home, he sent the local news to his parents in the form of a small newspaper he wrote, imitating the form and style of the large Warsaw newspapers. Drawing was one of Frédéric's favorite spare time hobbies. He loved to sketch in his exercise books and was a good cartoonist and comic artist. Music, however, always came first, despite his other interests. Frédéric would even get up in the middle of the night to write down a melody that occurred to him. During his school years, he continued to compose, but his music was written to please himself, not the public. Only one composition, the Rondo in C minor, was published during this time. In the summer of 1826, when Frédéric was 16, he enrolled at the Warsaw Conservatory to study music under Joseph Elsner. Frédéric still had much to learn, and Elsner was the most brilliant teacher in Warsaw. In his report at the end of the year, Elsner wrote this about Frédéric: Chopin, Frédéric, exceptional gifts, musical genius. Elsner insisted on allowing Frédéric freedom to develop musically in his own way, saying, he doesn't follow the usual path, but then his talent is no ordinary one either. Frédéric was not very strong and was often ill, so his family gave him a specially furnished room at the top of the house. There he practiced endlessly and continued composing. Soon, however, he began to dream of traveling. His first trip was a 2-week visit to Berlin when he was 18. On the way home from Berlin, Frédéric discovered an old piano at a roadside inn. While waiting for the horses to be changed and the coach to set out again, Frédéric sat down and played the piano to pass the time. In a short time, a crowd had gathered, and the room was full of people, all listening spellbound to Frédéric playing the piano. They wouldn't let him stop, even when the coach was ready to leave. But they finally had to let him go after the innkeeper had drunk a toast to his health. When Frédéric was 19, he set out for a short trip to Vienna with some friends. His studies with Elsner were completed. He was eager now to win world recognition. What does local applause matter, he asked. Let the people of Paris and Vienna judge me. In Vienna, Frédéric gave 2 concerts, playing his own compositions. The critics praised him highly, although some thought his playing was too delicate. But Chopin's light touch was exactly what set him apart from other pianists of the time, and audiences, particularly the women, were delighted with this new technique. After returning home, Frédéric, for the first time, found it difficult to compose. He spent much time dreaming about a young singer whom he secretly admired. He managed to express his feelings in the beautiful music of his piano concerto in F minor. Frédéric performed his concerto for the first time at home for a small audience of friends who applauded it enthusiastically. The first public performance, a month later, was a triumph. When Chopin was 20 years old, he left again for Vienna with a friend. As a special tribute, Joseph Elsner led a student choir in a song especially dedicated to his most talented student. Chopin took with him a silver cup filled with Polish soil, a remembrance he was to treasure highly because he never returned to his native land. Shortly after the young man reached Vienna, news arrived that a revolution had broken out in Poland. Chopin's friend returned home immediately to join the revolt, but Chopin's father instructed him not to return because Frédéric was not strong enough to fight. Some months later, Chopin left Vienna and set out for Paris. He felt that his music was not appreciated in Vienna and hoped for a better reception in Paris. Along the way, Frédéric learned that the Polish revolt had been crushed and that Russia had captured the city of Warsaw. Chopin expressed his sorrow over the fall of Warsaw in his stirring Etude in C minor, called the Revolutionary Etude. This composition is filled with rage and despair at the cruelties of war. Chopin reached Paris in the early autumn of 1831 and took modest lodgings in the Boulevard Poissonnière. His next step was to meet Friedrich Kalkbrenner, one of the leading concert pianists of the time. After hearing Chopin play, Kalkbrenner said he had talent but needed training. It would take 3 years to turn him into a top-rate pianist. Frédéric agreed at first to take lessons, but they lasted less than a month. Frédéric had no wish to become a carbon copy of his teacher. The two men remained friends, however. Another of Frédéric's close friends was Franz Liszt, the famous Hungarian pianist and composer. Chopin and Liszt spent many hours talking about music. Both Liszt and Kalkbrenner helped smooth the way for Chopin's first Paris concert. In February 1832, Chopin gave his first Paris concert, playing 2 of his own works. The newspapers praised his original ideas and predicted a brilliant future for him. But the concert did not bring any immediate results. Chopin was worried about his lack of money. One day, he wrote to his family that he was thinking of going to America, where life might be easier for a struggling pianist. But the same day, a chance meeting with an old friend led to an important turning point in Chopin's career. Chopin's friend took him to a party at the home of the Baron Rothschild. There, Chopin played the piano for the guests and was an immediate success. The Rothschilds and their friends were wealthy, important aristocrats. They arranged to take music lessons from Chopin for high fees and spread his reputation far and wide. Chopin's money troubles were over, and soon he could afford a fashionable apartment, servants, and fine clothes. During the next few years, Chopin did much composing, and fine works like this etude, or study, were published. The greatest pianists of the time played his compositions in concerts all over Europe. Chopin's fame as a composer continued to grow. In 1835, Frederick visited his parents at Karlsbad, Germany, where they had come to spend a holiday. He spent some of the happiest weeks of his life with them. It was the last time he was ever to see them. On his way back to Paris from Karlsbad, Frederick stopped in Dresden to visit Count Wodzinski, the father of an old school friend. The Wodzinskis welcomed him as if he were their own son. When he left the Wodzinskis, he wrote a special goodbye waltz for their daughter, Maria. In return, Maria gave him a red rose, which he, in a romantic gesture, wore next to his heart. The next summer, Frederick asked Maria to marry him. She accepted, but her mother asked them to keep the engagement a secret for a year so that Chopin would have time to recover his health. He had been ill the previous winter in Paris. After months of writing letters, Maria broke the engagement, and Frederick never saw her again. Chopin's unhappiness over the broken engagement ended a year or so later when he came to know Aurore Amandine Dudevant. She was a writer who used the pen name of George Sand. Frederick was to remain fascinated by her for 9 years. George Sand and Chopin spent a year on the island of Majorca in the Mediterranean Sea. In these beautiful surroundings, George Sand wrote a novel, while Chopin completed many fine musical compositions. Among these were the Preludes, some of his most poetic works. But the climate was bad for Frederick's weak lungs, and he became quite ill. Hoping that the climate in the French countryside would be good for Frederick, George Sand invited him to her home at Nohant, a comfortable, quiet country residence. Here Chopin rested for several months and partially recovered his health. For many years, Chopin spent his summers at Nohant, where he composed some of his finest works. Among these is the lovely sonata in B minor. It was almost 2 years after returning from Majorca before Chopin felt able to appear on the concert stage. In April 1841, he gave a concert in Paris, playing only his own works. The concert was a great triumph. For the next few years, however, he gave only occasional concerts because they were too great a strain on his failing health. In 1848, Chopin went to London. There was a revolution in France, and the French had no time for concerts or music lessons. Chopin appeared in public in London only a few times, since he was now very ill. A year later, in Paris, he died at the age of 39. Frédéric Chopin was dead, but his music lived on. His piano compositions, some of the finest in the world, are still played and loved today. His contributions to music were many. He brought new forms and ideas to the creation of music for the piano, and his originality of approach gave rise to new techniques of piano playing. For these reasons, Chopin is considered one of the greatest 19th century composers.
Ever lie on your back on a warm summer afternoon, just watching the clouds drift by, letting your mind daydream its way into those secret corners of the imagination? Sure you have, and so have most of us, from the beginning of history. Daydreaming has been, down through the ages, one of life's most delightful activities. This young fellow enjoyed daydreaming too. Years later, he was to become one of France's greatest composers, and to fill nearly every page of his music with the daydreams of a hazy, unreal world of the imagination, a mysterious world of mist and moonlight and whispers in the wind, a watery world of sun and sky and sea spray and the cry of gulls against a backdrop of blue, a dim, dreaming world of sunlight and shadow, and the hazy, half-hidden landscapes of forgotten yesterdays. This composer's name was Claude Achille Debussy, spinner of strange secrets and delicious dreams, and France's foremost musical magician. Claude Debussy was born at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, a suburb of Paris, in 1862, about 2 years after the outbreak of the Civil War in the United States. From the start, it seemed obvious that young Claude was destined for a musical career. By the time he was 11, the youngster was playing the piano so well that his parents decided to place him in the great French music school, the Paris Conservatory. Here, Claude's studies started off well enough. But in time, he ran into trouble. Finally, his piano instructor decided to have a serious talk with the lad.
You know what a good share of your trouble is, Claude? You're a daydreamer. You seem to be living in a kind of private dream world all your own.
Yes, sir.
And the rest of your trouble is you're a rebel, a nonconformist. You feel you can break every musical rule ever written, and then make up new ones of your own. You argue with your teachers instead of doing an honest day's work. You seem to think you can arrive 10, 15, 20 minutes late for an appointment like this one, without so much as one word of apology to anyone.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry indeed. You'd be wiser saving your apologies for the entire conservatory.
The entire conservatory, sir?
Why not? Since your arrival here 2 years ago, you've turned this school upside down by becoming the greatest single problem the conservatory has ever had to deal with. You irritate your teachers. You upset your fellow students. And you're driving all of us slowly mad with your endless questioning of the rules, your breaking of the rules, and you're making up new rules of your own.
But what about those 2 medals I won last summer?
Well, Claude, those awards make things even worse, for they indicate how far you could go if you would just obey the rules. For one thing, you'd go to the head of your class again. And for another, perhaps you'd wake up to your painful need for more practice. If you ever aspire to become a first-rate pianist, my boy, it is high time you learn the value of scales and exercises and the fundamentals of music, just as all of the great musicians of the past had to do.
Yes, sir.
Tell me something, Claude. Which of the great composers interests you the most?
Well, Chopin for one, and Bach for another, although I find him rather loud and long-winded in places.
Ah, loud and long-winded, is it? And what of the great Richard Wagner? I suppose you find him loud and long-winded also, eh?
No, sir. He is simply magnificent.
Aha! And do you know why? Because he studied long and hard all the rules.
But surely, sir, the great Wagner does not trouble himself over the rules today.
Ah, he breaks the rules here and there, it's true. But he became thoroughly familiar with them first. so that he knew why he was breaking them later.
But he did break the rules, sir.
Yes, Claude, he did break the rules now and then, but only because of
If the great Wagner can write such magnificent music by breaking rules, then perhaps I, too, can break the rules and become a composer.
A composer! Ha! At the rate you're going, young man, you'll become a composer the day it snows in July and zebras lose their stripes. Despite his professor's gloomy prediction, Claude Debussy did become a composer. Such a good one, in fact, that he was awarded a prize in his final year at the conservatory. A prize which allowed him to study for several expense-paid years in Rome, Italy. Returning to Paris in his mid-20s, Debussy soon became fascinated with the work of a number of young writers and artists who were busy experimenting with strange new ways of creating poems and paintings. These people were developing a style known as Impressionism, which means roughly the art of suggestion. In other words, they were looking for ways of getting something down on paper and canvas that was not so much a realistic description of a scene, but rather a hint or suggestion of it. The important thing to them was not so much the scene itself, but the feelings they had about the scene while painting it. Let's see just what this means. Suppose you're staying at a lake for the summer, and you send your cousin a picture postcard like this one to show him how your vacation spot looks. Well, most of the details are here, aren't they? The lake, the dock, the sailboats on the water. But let's take a closer look. There's nothing here to indicate the real feeling of the place, is there? Those special sensations so characteristic of lakeside resorts. What would help to give your cousin the feel and quality of the place would be an impression of the lake. Like this one. Auguste Renoir, the great French artist who created this impressionistic masterpiece, wants us to see the lake not so much as a photo, but rather the way he felt it and saw it with his own eyes, with the light reflecting on the colors in a certain way. This is an impression, then. Almost a dream of the lake, so painted as to make us feel as if we were actually taking part in that dream. Before long, Claude Debussy became so absorbed with what these artists were doing that he felt he, too, must attempt to capture these dreams and feelings and sensations, but in a music. In time, Debussy was composing music the like of which had never been heard before. A strange, lovely, mysterious kind of music, light and transparent as dragonfly wings. Music that whispered and hinted at those secret places that dwell within the depths of man's imagination. Listen. Debussy called this piece voile, the French word for sails. In it, he tried to capture the sensations one would have while moving slowly across the water's surface in a lovely sailboat. Did you notice the floating feeling about this music? The way it sort of suspended you in space as you listened to it? Debussy achieved this effect by making use of what musicians call the whole tone scale. The whole tone scale is really nothing more than our old friend, the regular major scale. But without the half steps, so that it sounds like this. Notice how hazy and blurry that scale sounded? Almost as if it were coming from beneath the water's surface. Debussy, in time, made such wide use of this scale that it eventually became his special trademark. Although his treatment of scales added much to the charm of his music, the real key to Debussy's greatness lay in his new and daring use of harmony. Running true to his early form as a rebel schoolboy, Debussy the man became rebel extraordinary. Now, thoroughly grounded in the fundamentals of harmony, he proceeded to break so many of its rules that the course of musical history was soon to be changed forever. And small wonder. Before Debussy's time, composers were writing solid, straightforward harmonies with clean, clear edges, like the colors in a flag. Listen. By contrast, here's the way Debussy made those chords sound, almost like the colors in a rainbow, whose shades and tones blend and melt together in a fuzzy, blurry kind of way. Among Debussy's favorite harmonic devices was his use of gliding chords, or what musicians today term parallel motion. To glide a chord over the piano keys, you move all of its notes together, like this. Another of Debussy's favorites was dissonance, that rather harsh sound you get when you press at the same time two keys that are next to each other on the piano. Debussy often built dissonances like these into entire chords, such as this one from the Engulfed Cathedral, a work for the piano. Armed with these bold and different musical ideas, and fortified with an imagination that knew no boundaries, this musical rebel, near the end of the 19th century, began to create a new musical style known as Impressionism, a mysterious and wholly unexplored world of music. Music capable of suggesting the sensations of sight and sound, touch and taste, nature and the out of doors. Music with titles like Gardens in the Rain, Reflections in the Water, and Bells Through the Leaves. With this music, Claude Debussy shocked and baffled his public, created a whole new musical style, altered completely the direction of musical history, and helped to prepare the way for much of the modern music we know today. One of Debussy's earliest successes was the lovely Clair de Lune, or Moonlight, which he composed in his early 20s. It remains today one of his most popular compositions. Among Debussy's first works for orchestra were the nocturnes, three-tone paintings which move in a hazy world of sunlight and shadow. The first of these selections is entitled Nuages, or Clouds. After a misty introduction in the woodwinds, the English horn punctuates the air with a slow, solemn song of the sky. In 1905, then at the peak of his powers, Debussy completed what many musicians believed to be his finest work for orchestra, La Mer, or The Sea. Its second movement is entitled Play of the Waves, and within its wind-tossed measures, you will hear the splash and spray of the sea, illuminated by 1,000 tiny glints of sunlight. Between 1906 and 1912, Debussy composed his last great work for orchestra, a three-part symphonic portrait of Spain, entitled Iberia. The final movement of this sunny score is called Morning of a Feast Day. If you listen closely, you'll hear such things as church bells, gypsy guitars, and the crack of a tambourine, marking the rhythm for a gay and fiery dance of celebration. During the course of his 56 years, Claude Debussy gave musical wings as no man had before him to that strange, hidden, mysterious land of the imagination. In so doing, he shook the established musical world to its very foundations and paved the way for the music to come. Claude Achille Debussy, rebel, daydreamer, genius, one of France's foremost composers and the world's great musical magician.
Welcome to Zane Publishing's Catalog and Information, our most complete catalog of reference and educational products. Here you'll see descriptions of our popular CD-ROMs, including many titles developed in partnership with noted authors and traditional publishers. You have the option of browsing the catalog, learning about our helpful services, or accessing additional information on this disc. You'll find that Zane's reference, home library, and special interest titles are great for both the young student and the curious adult. To find out more, you can quickly access the listings using the main index or browse the descriptions of the titles by clicking the buttons. Any of the titles presented can be ordered through our simple and secure electronic ordering program or by calling our toll-free sales number. In Help and Services, you'll find information about how to use this Power CD, how to register your purchase, and how to contact technical support and customer service. Each topic is clearly organized to answer your questions and provide solutions. Zane is dedicated to providing the best content and the best service possible. To find out more about us, click on the About Publisher button or visit our website. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy the following preview of some of our products. Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 10th edition. The Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 10th edition, continues the 150-year tradition of excellence pursued by America's foremost dictionary publisher. This voice of authority, which is America's best-selling dictionary, contains more than 214,000 entries. It draws upon Webster's third New International Dictionary unabridged and features well-crafted definitions and pronunciations, extensive cross-referencing, accurate and detailed etymologies, and informative illustrations and tables. The Collegiate Dictionary also includes supplemental material, such as biographical names, geographical names, abbreviations, foreign words and phrases, and a guide to punctuation. Encyclopedia of U.S. Postage Stamps. The Encyclopedia of U.S. Postage Stamps features the history and a large full-color reproduction of every face-different postage stamp design issued by the U.S. Postal Service, from the first stamp of Benjamin Franklin in 1847 through the popular World War II comic strip classics and antique automobile series from the fall of 1995. This fact-filled CD-ROM contains more than 50 minutes of multimedia presentations by leading philatelic expert and former New York Times stamp columnist Richard Zane and renowned stamp publisher Stephen Datz. A colorful 7-hour audio-visual slideshow displaying more than 2,700 U.S. postage stamp designs, an electronic glossary of philatelic terms, and 100 interactive questions with hypertext explanations plus automatic quizzes to reinforce comprehension. Encyclopedia of U.S. Endangered Species. What do long-spurred mint and running buffalo clover have in common with the grizzly bear and the bald eagle? All are endangered species in the United States, and all are among the more than 700 endangered animal and plant species featured in this comprehensive encyclopedia. Informative audio-visual presentations narrated by leading environmental professionals from the World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, and the Threatened and Endangered Species Information Institute gives you valuable insights into the plight of endangered wildlife in America. This incredible CD-ROM includes separate hypertext multimedia reports on each endangered species, dramatic color photos, locator maps, and state topographical maps, 131 interactive study questions, and a customized electronic glossary. The Animal Kingdom Vertebrates Series. Survey the vast array of fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals that inhabit the animal kingdom through 6 titles that beautifully illustrate the range and diversity of vertebrates. Hundreds of color photos, many full screen, show the animals in their natural habitats. A text supplement providing ready, concise encyclopedic information on an individual species can be accessed for selected species. Interactive study questions and a customized electronic glossary linked to each program, and automatic quizzes reinforce comprehension. Isaac Asimov's Library of the Universe. A fabulous 7 CD-ROM collection, Isaac Asimov's Library of the Universe explores the farthest reaches of the universe through the knowledge and imagination of one of the world's most respected scientific writers. You'll enjoy the vivid images, thought-provoking text, and creative presentation style that pulls all of the information together in a captivating multimedia format. Each CD-ROM includes a self-playing multimedia presentation, hundreds of images, a customized electronic glossary, and 100 interactive questions with answers to strengthen your understanding of the subject. History Through Art Collection. Each of the 9 CD-ROMs in the History Through Art collection tells the story of a different historical period, from 800 BC through AD 1900, by exploring its paintings, sculpture, and architectural treasures. You'll discover how the social, political, religious, and economic environments of each era influence the artists and their creations. Every title in the collection features a self-playing multimedia presentation linked to hundreds of images and thousands of words of informative text. Each title also contains a customized electronic glossary and 100 interactive questions with answers to strengthen your understanding of the subject. History of Music Collection. The History of Music collection, composed of 5 CD-ROMs, demonstrates how different cultures express their heritage through music, and shows you how to listen to musical works and appreciate different musical styles. Every title in the collection features a self-playing multimedia presentation containing a wide range of musical excerpts, a customized electronic glossary, and 100 interactive questions with answers to strengthen your understanding of the subject. British Literature, the Shakespeare Collection. This fabulous collection on 3 CD-ROMs explores the life and times of the world's greatest playwright, William Shakespeare. The collection contains informative discussions of his contributions to literature and features a selection of Shakespearean sonnets and authentic Elizabethan songs. Each CD-ROM includes a self-playing multimedia presentation, hundreds of images, a customized electronic glossary, and 100 interactive questions with answers to strengthen your understanding of the subject. The Crime Collection. Written and narrated by renowned true crime author J. Robert Nash, The Crime Collection puts you face to face with a blood-curdling gang of murderers, assassins, con artists, and mobsters. On 6 CD-ROMs, you'll learn about the crimes, victims, investigations, trials, and punishments. Each title features a self-playing multimedia presentation, hundreds of photos, a customized electronic glossary, and 100 interactive questions with answers to strengthen your understanding of the subject. This remarkable collection will provoke hours of fascination for criminologists, law enforcement officials, armchair detectives, anyone who's interested in the darker side of human behavior. Encyclopedia of the JFK Assassination. Written by internationally known JFK assassination researchers Bob Harris and Jane Rusconi, Director of Research for the popular Oliver Stone film JFK, the Encyclopedia of the JFK Assassination guides you through the assassination and the subsequent investigations. This fascinating CD-ROM includes a 36-minute multimedia presentation, 20 original essays on the assassination linked to more than 10,000 hypertext pages of original source evidence, more than 500 photographs, the complete Warren Commission report, the revealing House Select Committee on Assassinations report, and 163 provocative questions with more than 600 hypertext explanations, plus automatic quizzes to reinforce comprehension. Welcome to Zane Publishing's catalog.